What kind of book is the book of Proverbs, and for whom was it written?
Within the poetical books, the 5 poetical books is a subcategory of 3 books that scholars generally refer to as the wisdom books. And the 3 books that belong to that subcategory of the poetical books are Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes. So Proverbs is part of the genre of wisdom literature. And to the question, what kind of wisdom is the book of Proverbs? It is wisdom that we can describe as the skill to navigate the maze of life so that you avoid the many pitfalls and dangers and traps in the maze and achieve maximum success for yourself and for others. That is the kind of wisdom that you find in the book of Proverbs. It's very practical, and it is on how to live safely in a very, very, very unsafe and hostile, pathogenic world where everything wants to take you down. And how do you rise up against that tide that is dragging you down and not only survive but thrive within it? That's the kind of book, that's the kind of wisdom book Proverbs is.
And for whom was the book of Proverbs written specifically?
The best way to introduce the book of Proverbs is to use its own introduction, which is Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 to 7. Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 to 7. So I think if we go through this introduction, and we can call this the introduction to the book of Proverbs, we will see for whom it is written and why it was written. So we start with verse 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Now you look at that line and you think, well, okay, that's a pretty general line. It's good to know, and powerfully put together in those. In the Hebrew, it's only 6 words: Mishle, Shlomo, Ben David, Melech Israel. 6 words, but in that 6 words is packed so much that you need to know. For example, the Proverbs. That word tells you the genre of this book, and that is, it is made up primarily, its primary type of wisdom is Proverbs, and Proverbs is a particular type of wisdom literature. The proverb, the best way to describe the word a proverb is, it is that short, pithy statement that encapsulate a particular truth in one short, pithy sentence. And that type of sentence, some people call it sentence proverbs, is what most of the book of Proverbs is made up of. But it's not the only type of wisdom literature. You get the longer sayings, like the first 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs are longer lessons. They're not the short, pithy proverbs. And I guess we would call those more, we would call them lessons. They would be called the sayings of the wise, sayings. And you have several of them, well, all of them in chapters 1 to 9. Then you actually hit the Proverbs, the short, pithy sentences from chapter 10 to 22:16. Then in 22:17 to 22:24, you go back to the sentence sayings again. You're off the short, pithy sentences and you're more into lessons. Then you get back to the short, pithy Proverbs again in chapter 25 to chapter 29, the Proverbs of Solomon, which King Hezekiah's men found and collected. Then after 25 to 29, in chapter 30, you get back to the longer lessons, the sayings of Agur in chapter 30, and then the words of Lemuel, which his mother taught him. They're the longer versions. So this sentence, the Proverbs, gives you the genre of the major section of the book of Proverbs. It's the short sentence statements of truth and wisdom. Then Solomon, what does that tell you? Why is that important? Well, who's Solomon? Well, he's the king of Israel, but if you read the background about him, he was the wisest man that lived at his time. And there are several scriptures that say how wise he was and how everybody in the whole world of his day came to hear his wisdom. And why is it important to know that? Because that tells you a book by this man is trustworthy. Right? If you want to get the stuff, you go to the expert on it. And this is telling you Solomon is giving you wisdom. He is the expert on it. What about the son of David, king of Israel? Well, why is that important? Because the king of Israel is a charismatic figure. The king of Israel is endowed with the Spirit of God. And so when Solomon speaks the Proverbs, he is speaking under inspiration of God. And so the Proverbs are inspired. This is an inspired book coming from God because it's the king of Israel in his official capacity, endowed with the Spirit, speaking them. So right in that one sentence, you're given all of this. You're given the genre, you're given the trustworthiness. Why should you trust it? It's from the smartest man. And you're given the spiritual disposition. It is inspired. It's inspired scripture because Solomon is an inspired person. So the first sentence is what I call the who and the what. The authorship, the author, and the genre. Now, in verses 2 to 6, you get the for whom and the what, more specifically. So for whom? If you read verses 2 to 6, you will notice that there are 3 categories of people that are mentioned. So let's read them. For gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight. Okay, so now we're into the purpose. Why did Solomon write these? Why was this book collected? It was for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight. We'll talk about that in a minute. For receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair. So if you notice verse 2, for receiving, that's passive, right? You're receiving it. So who is receiving this? Well, verse 4, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. They are the ones who are going to receive this book. So this book is first and foremost for young people. Young people. The young and what we call the, how does NIV put it? For giving prudence to those who are simple. I don't like the word simple. So in my commentary with Walkie, we are changing it to uncommitted. To the uncommitted. And the young. Now you can see the parallelism here, right? Parallelism for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair. Here's line A, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to those who are young. So the uncommitted in line A, who are they? Well, the line B, synthetic parallelism, explains it a bit better. It is the young in Israel. So that's the first group it's written to, the young people of Israel. But notice in verse 4, it's moved from the passive in verse 3 for receiving to, in verse 4, for giving. So who would that be? Who gives this instruction? Well, it's the parents and the teachers who must give the wisdom to the receiving youth. So there's the second group of people that the book is written to. The book of Proverbs is primarily written to the young people in Israel, the young son. The whole book of Proverbs is addressed to the young male.
Right.
And it is given to the young person by their parents and the teachers who are supposed to teach it to them. Those are the 2 main people that the book of Proverbs is given to. For parents to receive it themselves and learn it when they were young, and then for them to transmit it on to the next generation. But then what about others? I don't know where you stand right now. You're probably in the parent stage. But I'm sort of beyond that now. Well, thank goodness. Look at verse 5. Let anybody who wants to be wise come and add to their learning, and let the discerning gain guidance. And so he opens it up now to anybody. Anybody who wants wisdom, come and feast in this book. So there are the 3 groups of people the book of Proverbs is written to. But the primary target is the young, uncommitted person.
Right.
And here's the amazing thing about the book of Proverbs and about God. This is the only book I know in the Old Testament that God has given specifically for young people. He cares about them so much that he gives them their own book. And it is put in the hands of parents in order to instruct their children in how to become a wise person.
Right.
The primary target of the book of Proverbs would be that young person in about 17 to 19 years of age who is just about to step out of the parental home and enter into society and create a new identity
Right.
and become a new unit, get married, get his job, and establish himself in society. And the parents recognize that that transition period from the protected home where they could control and watch over and constrain the son is now going, and they are losing it. And now the son is stepping out into a very hostile, dangerous, wicked world.
Right.
And they want to do everything they can to prepare the son for life and success in that new sphere.
Right.
And so the book of Proverbs is addressed to those people. And then he throws it out to anybody who wants to be wise. Come on in and feast in this book. Now, I should have said something here that's very important. There are many unique things about the book of Proverbs, and one of the unique things is this. If you were to compare the book of Proverbs to the other wisdom literature of the ancient Near East of the time, the wisdom of Egypt, Amenemope, or the wisdom of Babylon and so forth, the wisdom literature always stated the author who was writing it and who was receiving it. And it was specifically either the son that was a named son or a named disciple,
Right.
protege of the person. It always has that, the author and a named individual, my son or my protege. The book of Proverbs, notice it's missing. So the first line actually tells you something by omitting something. It omits a specific recipient. Because if it was being parallel to all the other wisdom literature of the day, it should have said the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for his son Rehoboam. But he doesn't. Why not? Why did it break this pattern of the other ancient wisdom literature? Because Israel has a different anthropology. In Israel, attached to this, I have to make another point. All wisdom throughout the generations in the ancient times were created and tightly controlled among the elites. Wisdom was not for the common person.
Right.
It was for kings, it was for priests, it was for governors, it was for rulers, it was for princes. It was for the elite to know how to behave. The common person didn't know that, didn't need that. They just needed laws, and they needed to be directed by the elites. And so wisdom was maintained and tightly guarded amongst them. And that's why it is for your particular son or your particular disciple. Proverbs does not name the royal son of Solomon because it democratizes it. It is for everybody in Israel. Because in Israel, the belief is that all people are created in the image of God. In the other cultures, only the king really is in the image of God, and then it goes down to the slave who is in the image of humans. But in Israel, everybody's in the image of God, and Solomon writes this book, and the editor adds to it and puts it in the hand of every parent to teach it to their children so that their children have the best possible chance in a very, very dangerous world. So that is who the book is written to. What is it? It is wisdom. Wisdom. Now wisdom, but then you will read words like this, wisdom and instruction. For understanding, words of insight. For receiving, there's instruction again. Prudence, prudent behavior. Doing what is right and just and fair. For giving prudence to those who are simple. Knowledge and discretion. So you have a whole bunch of words here. You have wisdom, you have knowledge, you have discretion, you have instruction, you have prudence. Doing what is just and right and fair. What are all these different things? They're all categories of wisdom, types of wisdom. If you think of wisdom as a light, and what happens when you shine that light? You run that light beam through a prism. Right? The prism breaks the light down into its wavelengths, and we see it as different colors, the colors of the rainbow. So on one side of the prism, you have the one beam of light going in, and on the other side, you have a rainbow of colors, the light broken into its different wavelengths. That's really what's going on here. Wisdom is that one single beam of light, And all of these other things are the rainbow of wisdom, prudence and instruction and discretion and shrewdness, and all of this are all different aspects within the big category of wisdom. They all have their own slightly shaded nuances. For example, wisdom is a big category, the overall general term. Prudence is specific. Prudence is 4 things. You're a prudent person if you do 4 things. And that is the ability to see into a situation and notice the coming danger. Okay, to look into a situation and anticipate the danger. That's the first part. Then you're able to create a plan to avoid the danger. Then thirdly, you enact the plan. And then fourthly, you reap the reward. All 4 of those things are components of prudence.
Right.
You have to do all of them. Jesus is described as having prudence. He foresaw the danger or the situation that he needed to go to the cross in this way. He prepared himself for it, and he put the plan into action. When everybody tried to dissuade him from it, he stuck to it, and he reaped the reward.
Right.
Okay, he received the name that is above all names, and he saved us all. So he's a prudent person. The other word, for example, shrewdness. If you notice the NIV, they use the same word for in 2 places, for receiving instruction and prudent behavior, and for giving prudence. That's an unfortunate translation because it's 2 totally different Hebrew words.
Right.
The first word for receiving instruction in what they translate as prudent behavior is actually shrewdness, cunning. It's the word that comes from the word orma. Actually, guess who? Guess who the first character in the Bible that is described using one of these terms, one of these wisdom terms? Do you know? Right in Genesis 3, chapter 1. Genesis 3, verse 1. The serpent. This word, that the son, exactly, the same quality of wisdom that the son is supposed to get, shrewdness, is what the serpent is described as having. Now, shrewdness is another thing. What is shrewdness? It's 2 things. Knowing what you want in life and knowing how to get it. That you're a shrewd person. If you have both of those things, you know what you want and you know how to get it. So when the serpent is said to be shrewd, cunning, it means he knew what he wants and he knew how to get it. Okay. Now we can go on that and go, well, and the next word you read is, he said to the woman, but we won't go there. We won't go there today. But here's the son is supposed to get that, so that the son knows, the young person knows. And you can see how young people, this will be a very important thing for young people, because most young people have no clue what they want in life and certainly no clue how to get it. They're wandering around clueless. But here's the wisdom to enable them to get it. And here are parents who are supposed to take this and pass it on to their children. Now, I've attended and read and attended so many parenting seminars. I've read so many books on parenting. But the one thing I've never read in any of those is how the book of Proverbs is God's manual for training children. This is his manual. And you neglect it to your own peril. Jesus would have memorized. He would have been taught, and he would have memorized this book. It is quoted about him by Luke when he goes home after the temple incident when he's 12 years old, and Luke says, and he grew up in stature before God and man. That's a quotation of Luke is quoting chapter 3. And Jesus quotes Proverbs at a very critical time. If you look at chapter 30, verse 7, and then you look at Matthew chapter 6, verse 11, in the Lord's Prayer, he makes a very critical statement. Give us this day our daily bread. Where is he getting that daily bread from? And what does it mean? We pray that and we go, Lord, give me plenty of bread. It's from Agur's prayer, right? Give me neither too much nor too little. Give me neither poverty nor abundance, but give me my daily bread. And Jesus takes that prayer of Agur and he incorporates it into his own prayer to pray to us. The book of Proverbs is alluded to about 100 times. It is quoted about 7 or 8 times directly in the New Testament. Hebrews quotes it, James quotes it, I believe it's quoted in Peter, Paul quotes it, and it is a very significant book. It's a spiritually powerful book. It's what made Jesus the wise person that he was, and we are really fools to ignore it.